The boy's breath came in quick, frosty puffs as he ran through the snow-covered woods, moonlight flashing off the icicles that hung like knives from the branches overhead. Behind him, a woman's voice screamed, a raw, broken sound that shattered the silence of the forest. "Liam, don't stop." But he did, just for a second, just long enough to glance back and see the figure in the shadows, a tall man in a black parka, unmoving, face hidden by the night. Liam's mother stood between him and the man, shielding her children. Her arms were out like wings, trembling. Then, a deafening snap, a fall, a scream, darkness. The bell above the thrift store door chimed sharply as Tessa Logan stepped inside, the cold Montana air nipping at her cheeks before the door clicked shut behind her. She stamped snow off her boots and glanced around, breathing in the familiar mix of mothballs, old wood, and forgotten stories stitched into second-hand clothes. It was a quiet Tuesday afternoon during her winter break, and volunteering at the local donation center had become her way of keeping busy in the sleepy town of Bozeman. It was better than staying cooped up at home, staring at her parents while they stared at each other over meals they barely touched. She headed toward the back of the store where a new bin of winter clothes had just been wheeled in from the donation drop-off. The manager, Carol, a wiry woman in her 60s who wore a cardigan for every day of the week, waved her toward it. "Start with the jackets. It's supposed to snow again tomorrow. People will be looking for coats," she said, already halfway through a stack of scarves that smelled faintly of cinnamon and thyme. Tessa nodded, tugged on a pair of gloves, and knelt beside the bin. She liked this part of the job, sorting through the layers of other people's lives, wondering who they were, where they went, what they left behind. There was something oddly soothing about folding sweaters and hanging up coats that might keep someone else warm. She was halfway through the pile, most of it standard fare. Worn denim, fleece hoodies, a bright orange ski jacket with a broken zipper. When her fingers brushed something heavy buried beneath a tangle of sleeves, she pulled out a faded red parka. It was well worn, maybe once expensive, with padded lining and a sheared fur hood. The cuffs were frayed, and the zipper had a tooth missing just below the collar, but the coat was otherwise intact. She held it up for inspection. There was something nostalgic about it, though she couldn't quite place why. It reminded her of something out of a childhood Christmas card, candy apple red against soft white snow, a family photo maybe. But then her fingers found something. A hard bump nestled in the lining. Her brow furrowed. She reached inside the inner pocket, expecting loose change or maybe an old wallet. Instead, her hand closed around something solid and rectangular. She tugged, and out came a small, dusty digital camera, the kind that had been popular before smartphones took over everything. "Whoa," she murmured, flipping it over. It was scratched but intact. A dull silver with black trim, maybe a Canon. She pressed the power button. For a second, nothing happened. Then the screen blinked to life. Battery low. One item found. Tessa glanced around. Carol was helping an older woman at the front counter. She looked back at the screen and tapped the playback button. A single file. 24 Fuzz DEC 2013 MP4. The date made her pause. Christmas Eve, almost exactly 11 years ago. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the button. Part of her said it wasn't hers to see. But the stronger part, the curious, aching part, wanted to know. She pressed play. The screen flickered, then steadied. A warm, golden living room filled the frame. A fireplace crackled in the background. A Christmas tree, slightly lopsided, blinked with soft white lights. 4 people were crowded in the shot, 2 adults and 2 children, laughing as they unwrapped gifts. The father wore a cable-knit sweater and held a steaming mug, his arm around a woman with auburn hair pulled into a loose bun. The kids were nestled on the floor. A boy, maybe 9 or 10, the girl younger, with a missing front tooth and red pajamas patterned with snowflakes. They looked like a postcard, a perfect moment suspended in time. Tessa's smile faltered as the video shifted. The father leaned toward the camera as if adjusting it. His voice, quiet but deliberate, echoed through the tiny speaker. "If someone finds this, it means we didn't make it." Her stomach dropped. He looked directly into the lens, eyes serious, afraid. Behind him, the boy glanced toward the window, expression tense now. The mother's smile faded. The little girl clutched her stuffed bear. The screen went black. That was it. Tessa sat frozen for a moment, her hands trembling slightly. Her heart thudded as if she'd just run a mile. There was something deeply wrong about the shift in that video. The abruptness, the fear, the words. It means we didn't make it. She quickly rewound and watched the last 15 seconds again. This time, she noticed something else, barely visible in the window's reflection behind the family. A shadow. A figure standing just outside, unmoving. Someone had been there. Tessa's mind raced. This wasn't just a forgotten memory on an old camera. This felt unresolved, unanswered, maybe even evidence. She grabbed her phone and typed the date and a few keywords. Family, missing, Christmas Eve, 2013. It didn't take long. Hollis family disappearance still unsolved, 11 years later. Colorado family vanished on Christmas Eve, cabin found empty. No trace of 4 missing since 2013 holiday tragedy. Her breath caught, the names jumped out. Mark and Jenna Hollis. Children, Liam and Evie, last seen in their cabin near Flatiron Ridge, Colorado. No signs of struggle, no bodies, just gone. The photo matched. It was them. The same 4 faces she had just seen alive, laughing on the tiny screen in her hands. Tessa stood up slowly, still holding the camera, her other hand gripping the edge of the donation bin for balance. The room spun slightly. She looked toward Carol, unsure of what to say. Somewhere, 11 years ago, a family had vanished without a trace. And now in her hands, she might be holding their last message, their last proof of life. Tessa didn't sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her twin bed in her parents' guest room, knees pulled to her chest. The thrift store's red parka lying folded on the chair across the room like a coiled memory. The digital camera sat on her nightstand, screen dark now, but the images from the video still burned behind her eyes. A happy family, a crackling fire, a father's warning. If someone finds this, it means we didn't make it. The line haunted her, not just because of what it implied, but because of the chilling sincerity in the man's voice. That was no prank, no joke. That was a man who truly believed he and his family were about to disappear. Tessa had never heard of the Hollis family before, not that she could recall, but after watching that video, she'd felt pulled into their story, like a thread caught on something sharp. She'd spent the next 3 hours deep in a rabbit hole of old news articles, archived YouTube videos, and Reddit forums. The deeper she went, the colder her room felt. The Hollis case hadn't just been local news, it had been national, viral even. It all began on December 26, 2013, when neighbors reported that the family hadn't returned any holiday calls. A welfare check by local authorities led to a chilling discovery. Their cabin, nestled deep in the Colorado Rockies near Flatiron Ridge, had been left in what investigators described as an eerily intact state. The fireplace still held unburned wood. The tree was decorated. 4 mugs of hot cocoa were on the counter. 1 half drunk, 1 spilled. But there were no signs of the family. No blood, no struggle, no indication that they had packed up and left. The case was bizarre enough to dominate headlines for weeks. Local police, forest rangers, even FBI agents were brought in. Dogs combed the snow. Drones and helicopters flew grid patterns across nearby ravines and frozen lakes. A few footprints were found in the snow outside the cabin. At least 5 sets, possibly more, but they led nowhere. Literally. They vanished beneath fresh snowfall, as if the family had walked into the sky. Then came the public theories. Some said it was a botched robbery, the work of drifters or escaped convicts. Others speculated that Mark Hollis, a former financial consultant from Denver, had been involved in shady dealings and staged the disappearance to escape retribution. Still others leaned into the strange alien abduction, wilderness cults, government cover-up. But the most persistent theory was the most chilling. They were taken, all of them, and the forest kept the secret. Tessa leaned back against her pillow, her laptop glowing against the dark room. She was currently reading a Reddit thread titled, "The Hollis Cabin Wasn't Empty, You Just Can't See the Shadow in the Mirror." Most of it was conspiracy-fueled nonsense, but one commenter posted something that made her pause. The most haunting part? No one ever found a single photo or video of the family from that night. No Christmas pictures, no phone records, nothing. It's like time stopped. Except now, 11 years later, Tessa had the one thing the investigation never uncovered. She picked up the camera again and replayed the video. This time she focused on the boy, Liam. There was something in his eyes even before the father spoke, something watchful, protective, as if he knew something was about to go wrong. The last seconds played again, the father's warning, a soft rustling sound off-screen, then the static. Tessa reached for her phone and dialed the non-emergency number for the local police. Her voice trembled as she explained what she'd found. The camera, the date on the video, the names. The woman on the line didn't seem to fully understand at first, but when Tessa mentioned the Hollis family and said the video ended with a verbal warning, the tone shifted instantly. Someone will call you back. Stay where you are. Don't delete the file. Less than 2 hours later, 2 officers arrived at her house. Detective Henry Blake was nothing like the local officers she'd met before. He was taller than average, dressed in a plain navy coat, and had the quiet, deliberate air of someone used to listening more than speaking. His partner, Agent Dana Vickers, was from the Denver field office. She had sharp eyes, and the way she scanned the room reminded Tessa of someone expecting something to jump out of the shadows. They watched the video without a word. When it ended, Blake asked to see the jacket. Vickers inspected the pocket lining where the camera had been hidden. "You're positive this came from a donation bin?" she asked. Tessa nodded. "I was sorting coats at the shop yesterday. It was buried under other jackets. I didn't even notice the weight until I picked it up." Vickers leaned back slightly. "This isn't just evidence," she said. "It might be the last record of that family's final hours." Blake looked at Tessa. "You said you've never seen this before. You don't know anyone who would have donated the coat." "No," Tessa said. "It didn't have a tag or name, just showed up with the others." Blake sighed through his nose. 11 years. The Hollis case went cold after 6 months. Not a trace. We always suspected there was more to it. But this could be a break. Vickers already had gloves on. She carefully bagged the camera. "We'll need to enhance the footage. That reflection in the window. If it's a person, we might be able to match it to someone." Blake added, "And if the boy in the video survived, he could still be alive. A kid that age wouldn't just vanish. If someone took him, raised him under a different name, moved him across state lines." Or, Vickers interrupted gently, "he ran, got lost, ended up somewhere else, and forgot." Tessa blinked. "You mean like amnesia?" "It's rare," Blake admitted, "but trauma can do strange things. A child under severe stress might repress memories, especially if he believed his whole family had died." The thought made Tessa's stomach twist. Somewhere out there, Liam Hollis might still be alive. A teenager, a college student. Maybe even someone who'd walked past her at the store without either of them knowing. She looked down at her own reflection in the camera's dark screen. One moment, one forgotten jacket. And suddenly, a mystery the world had stopped asking about had come roaring back to life. The footage was only 1 minute and 43 seconds long, but it was enough to pull a decade-old mystery back from the dead. That night, in a government lab in Denver, the video Tessa found was played dozens of times on a looping monitor, each frame slowed, sharpened, and dissected by a team of digital analysts and behavioral experts. Detective Henry Blake stood silently at the back of the observation room, arms crossed, eyes fixed on the screen. Agent Vickers sat beside the tech specialist at the controls, tapping her pen against a clipboard every time the image flickered. No one in the room spoke much. They didn't need to. The weight of what they were looking at said everything. The scene was simple. A family gathered around their fireplace on Christmas Eve. But under the surface of that warmth, the cozy lighting, the laughter, the rustle of wrapping paper, something unnatural lurked, like the hum of a distant alarm only a few people could hear. "Okay," said Eric, the analyst at the console, pausing the video. "Frame 813 right here. This is where it gets interesting." He tapped a key and zoomed in. The image shifted from the children to the window behind them. where reflections from the tree lights glimmered faintly on the glass. The angle wasn't ideal. There was some distortion from the snow outside and a light glare from the fireplace. But even through the blur, the outline became unmistakable. A figure, tall, human-shaped, stationary. "Jesus," someone muttered from the back of the room. Eric adjusted the contrast, isolating the brightest areas from the darkest. The figure grew more distinct, not a trick of the light, not an optical illusion. The silhouette was real. It stood just outside the cabin window, about 10 feet back from the porch. What chilled everyone wasn't just its presence, but its posture. It was watching. "Enhance further," Vickers said, leaning forward. "We're pushing pixel integrity already," Eric replied. "This is a 12-year-old consumer-grade camera. We can't reconstruct details that aren't there." "But can you confirm it's not a reflection of someone inside the cabin?" Eric shook his head. "The reflection angle's all wrong. Plus, all 4 family members are accounted for in the shot. This isn't one of them. This is someone outside." Blake exhaled slowly. "Which means the father wasn't paranoid. He knew someone was out there." Vickers nodded, and he tried to leave a message. He just didn't have time. There was a silence that hung thick in the air for several seconds before Blake broke it. "Freeze at timestamp 117. Eric did. In this frame, the father, Mark Hollis, was half-turned toward the camera. His hand hovered over his son's shoulder, protective, as if anticipating something. The boy, Liam, stared off-camera, tension building in his small frame, and just behind them, outside the window, that shape remained fixed. Not moving, not approaching, just waiting. Blake looked at Vickers. "Do we have any files on persons of interest from the original investigation?" She nodded. 3 people were looked at seriously. One was an ex-con who'd worked maintenance in the area. Cleared. One was a disgruntled former friend of the father's from his Denver firm. Raymond Kerr. Blake raised an eyebrow. "That name's familiar." "It should be," she replied. "He vanished a month after the Hollis case went cold, said he was moving to Alaska, never showed up in employment or tax records again." "So either he's dead," Blake said, "or he didn't want to be found." "Exactly." Eric jumped in. "If we can get a photo of this Kerr guy, I can do a basic overlay with the figure's proportions, compare shoulder width, estimated height, posture." "Do it," Vickers said. "Even circumstantial visual evidence will help if we reopen charges." Blake nodded toward the screen again. "Rewind to the moment Hollis speaks." The video rolled backward. The father, seated by the fire, leaned in. His voice, hushed and resigned, played again. "If someone finds this, it means we didn't make it." Blake narrowed his eyes. "Listen to the sound behind his voice." Eric boosted the audio, filtering out ambient crackle from the fire. There it was, a soft creak, almost imperceptible, like a footstep on a wooden porch. And then another sound. Barely audible, but unmistakable to anyone listening closely, the rattle of a doorknob. Blake stepped back from the monitor. They didn't just vanish, they were taken. Meanwhile, in Bozeman, Tessa sat in the back of the thrift shop's break room, a cup of cooling coffee cradled in her hands. She had told Carol everything. The police had already picked up the jacket and camera as evidence, and the store was abuzz with a new, surreal energy. The break room TV played a local news segment, "Cold Case Thawed, Missing Family Footage Found in Thrift Store Jacket." Tessa's name wasn't mentioned, which she preferred. But as she watched the grainy freeze frame of the Hollis family, faces glowing with Christmas joy moments before disaster, she felt a strange ache in her chest. They were real people, not just a mystery, not just a name in an article. She'd seen them alive, smiling, laughing. And now the world knew they hadn't just disappeared into snow and silence. Someone had been watching them, waiting, perhaps hunting. Back in Denver, Blake stared at a corkboard in the FBI field office's cold case division. On it were pinned printed stills from the video, Liam's face, the father's final look, and that dark, blurry shape outside the window. He moved a yellow pushpin from the unknown presence column to a photo of Raymond Kerr, taken in 2012 by stocky, clean-shaven, mid-40s, a permanent scowl etched into his expression. "This the man who was watching them?" he murmured aloud. Vickers stepped beside him. "If it was Kerr, we need to know what he wanted. What was he looking for that night?" Blake's eyes drifted back to the footage still. Maybe he wasn't looking for something. He paused. Maybe he was settling a score. He walked into the shelter like a ghost, with snow in his hair and silence in his eyes. The security footage from that night, January 3rd, barely a week after the video resurfaced, showed him stumbling through the doors of St. Augustine's homeless outreach in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. He wore a torn flannel shirt under a heavy red hoodie, his jeans caked in mud and frost. He had no backpack, no phone, and no wallet. Just a broken wristwatch strapped too tightly around his wrist and a 1,000-yard stare that made the intake nurse pause before calling someone else over. The timestamp on the footage read 9:17 p.m. He didn't give a name. When asked, he mumbled something that sounded like Luke or Leaf before falling into a coughing fit. The nurse wrote down John Doe 47, the 47th unidentified male processed by the shelter in the last 5 years. They gave him a cot near the back wall and a bowl of hot chili. He ate slowly, methodically, like it was something he'd once known how to do but had since forgotten. He didn't speak to the other men. Didn't flinch when someone dropped a tray nearby. Just sat there with his shoulders hunched and his eyes fixed on the cracked tile floor like he was waiting for something, or someone, to come for him. No one did, until 2 weeks later, when a red parka he had left in a donation bin turned up in Montana with a camera inside. Detective Blake and Agent Vickers arrived at St. Augustine's in an unmarked SUV just after dawn. The shelter manager, a no-nonsense woman named Ruth Malone, greeted them with a clipboard and a stack of intake forms. She had recognized the man the moment Tessa's thrift store story hit the news. It wasn't the parka or the camera that triggered her memory. It was the watch. She remembered because he had handed it to her after nearly getting into a fight with one of the other residents. He said it was the only thing he couldn't lose, she told Blake as they sat in her cramped office. Made me promise to give it back if he ever came looking for it. Vickers turned the object over in her gloved hand. The face was scratched, the strap cracked with age. But the engraving was still legible. LH. "Do you have any footage of him?" Vickers asked. Ruth tapped her laptop. The grainy security cam image appeared on screen. There he was, slouched at the intake desk, eyes down, hands folded in his lap. He looked 17, maybe 18, slender, pale, eyes sunken. But even in the low-res video, the resemblance was there. Blake pulled a printed still from the Hollis video out of his folder. Liam Hollis, age 9. He held the two images side by side. The same shape to the nose, same arch of the brow, same small scar near the left temple. "Jesus," he whispered, "it's him." They found him 3 blocks from the shelter. He was sitting on a bench near the frozen waterfront, hood up, hands tucked into his sleeves, watching the lake with a blank expression. At first, he didn't react when they approached. Only when Blake said the name Liam did something in his face flicker. Just a crack, like a curtain twitching in the wind. He didn't run, he didn't speak, he just stared. "Liam," Blake said gently, "we think we know who you are. Your name is Liam Hollis. You've been missing since December 24th, 2013. The boy blinked. "That's not me," he murmured. "Do you remember anything about a cabin, a little sister, your parents?" Silence. Blake crouched beside him, pulling out a photo from the folder. A still image from the video, Liam and Evie, sitting on the floor in front of the fire, smiling. "This was you," Blake said. The boy looked down at the photo, his jaw twitching. I don't remember her." Vickers stepped forward. "It's okay. You don't have to remember everything right away. Trauma can fracture memory. You went through something terrible. You survived." He closed his eyes. "I dreamed about the cold. For years, I always woke up with ice in my chest." Blake's voice was soft. "Can we take you somewhere safe? Somewhere quiet?" After a long pause, the boy nodded. They flew him to Denver that same night. The media caught wind quickly, but the FBI kept details quiet. To the public, he remained an unidentified teen connected to an ongoing cold case. To the team behind closed doors, however, he was the long-lost key to everything. He was placed under observation at a secured psychiatric facility just outside the city. For days, he barely spoke. He ate what was given, slept for hours at a time, and woke with a start any time someone knocked on the door. He didn't ask questions, didn't request anything. Only once, during a routine conversation with the FBI trauma counselor, did he whisper something unexpected. There were 5 people in the cabin that night. The counselor froze. 4 family members, she said carefully, and 1 more. He nodded slowly, eyes distant. He had snow in his beard and a black coat. I saw him through the window. A pause, then he was staring at Evie. The girl in the video, the sister. Do you remember what happened next? His voice dropped. The lights went out. Across town, Blake and Vickers built a board, a digital timeline, photos, reports, maps. In the center, the Hollis cabin, red string stretching from it in all directions. Disappearance, weather reports, donations, Kerr's financial records. The camera, the boy, but one lead glowed like a pulse beneath everything. Raymond Kerr. A background check revealed that Kerr had worked closely with Mark Hollis years earlier at a Denver investment firm. Hollis had been the whistleblower when irregularities were discovered in client portfolios. Kerr had been forced to resign, publicly humiliated, bankrupted. There were court records showing he had made threats against Hollis. A restraining order had been filed but never enforced. And then, weeks after the Hollis family vanished, Kerr disappeared too. His phone was deactivated, his truck was sold, his house went dark. The timing was too clean, too convenient. And now Blake had reason to believe Kerr had been at that cabin, staring in through the window, waiting. In the facility, Liam sat quietly as a psychologist showed him a second photo. This one of a man in a black parka, cropped from old security footage taken at a gas station in Wyoming, dated December 23, 2013. A man matching Kerr's build. Liam stared at it for a long time. Then he said, "He came through the door." The snow fell steadily outside the high windows of the psychiatric facility, blanketing the surrounding trees in silence. Inside room 314, Liam Hollis sat cross-legged on the narrow bed, his fingers twisting the frayed edge of a hospital-issued blanket. He hadn't spoken in almost a full day. Dr. Elena Marlowe sat in the corner, notepad resting on her knees, watching him with quiet patience. She was the 5th specialist brought in by the FBI, soft-spoken, mid-40s, and known for coaxing memory out of trauma victims without force. She didn't bombard him with questions. She didn't probe. She waited. Liam had already surprised everyone by naming his sister Evie in a moment of clarity. But since then, he'd retreated again, further this time, as if saying her name had unlocked a door, only to realize it led into a room too dark to step inside. "Elena," he asked suddenly, his voice raspy with disuse. She looked up. "Yes? Can you forget someone so completely that it feels like they weren't real?" She folded her hands. Sometimes, when the brain is trying to protect itself, it locks painful memories away. It doesn't destroy them. It just hides them until it thinks you're strong enough. Liam nodded slowly. "That's what it feels like. Like there's a room in my head and I'm standing outside it. I know there's something terrible inside, but I can't go in." "Do you know what's behind the door?" He stared at his hands. "I think it's the night my family disappeared." The official report said he had washed up on a riverbank in early January 2014, nearly 2 weeks after the Hollis family vanished. A fisherman had spotted a small figure in the reeds, unconscious, barely alive. He'd been taken to a rural hospital, diagnosed with hypothermia, bruised ribs, a mild concussion, and acute retrograde amnesia. With no ID, no memory, and no reported missing child matching his face in the local database, the boy had been entered into the system as a Jane John Doe. The name Luke had been assigned by the intake nurse based on something he had mumbled during a fever dream. Hollis never came up, neither did Liam. He had become a blank slate in a world of too many lost children. He had bounced through temporary homes, shelters, and group programs in Idaho and Montana. Every report filed about him described him the same way. Polite, quiet, withdrawn, no behavioral issues, but also no emotional attachments. He never made friends, never talked about where he was from, never cried. It was like he had fallen from the sky. He remembered flashes, water, stars, a woman screaming, ice cracking under his feet. But they had always come like dreams, flickering images with no sound or structure. He never knew what was real, until the FBI had shown him the video. "You said there were 5 people in the cabin," Elena said gently. "Do you remember who the 5th person was?" Liam shook his head. "I never saw his face, just the coat and the way he moved, like he didn't care if we saw him." "What happened after you saw him?" Liam's eyes glazed slightly. "We were opening presents. Evie got a stuffed penguin. Dad joked about the fireplace not working. Then he saw something through the window. I think that's when he picked up the camera." Elena nodded, encouraging him to continue. "I remember him telling us to run. He told Mum to grab the car keys, but the engine wouldn't start. Now the words came faster, like something deep inside had loosened. We ran out the back door, into the woods. The snow was thick. Evie fell once, but I helped her up. We could hear shouting, and then a bang, like something heavy broke. I think the front door." His hands tightened into fists, his jaw clenched. "We got to the river. It was frozen mostly, but there were parts that weren't safe. Evie slipped." A pause. "I tried to grab her. She was screaming. I couldn't hold on. The ice cracked. I fell too." Elena's pen stopped moving. "Do you remember what happened after that?" Liam blinked. "No, just the cold, then nothing." Blake reviewed the transcript of the session later that day. He read it twice, then handed it silently to Vickers. She read it once and put it down slowly. "That confirms it, Sheikah," she said. "Liam was there. He and Evie made it to the river, but only he survived." Blake nodded. "We'll need to search downstream, with sonar, drones, everything. She might have been carried miles before the river iced over." "What about the man in the coat?" she asked. "Kerr," Blake said quietly. "He was in Denver as of December 21st, 2013. He withdrew $6,000 in cash, purchased gas canisters, and shut down his accounts. His last known location was in a town 70 miles from the Hollis cabin. So he had motive, and he was close." Blake picked up a printed still from the video and stared at the window reflection again. "Mark Hollis tried to leave us a clue. He picked up that camera because he knew the end was coming. The real question now is, was Kerr there to kill them, or was he looking for something?" Back at the facility, Liam stood by the window in his room, watching the snowfall. For the first time since arriving, he didn't feel like a ghost. He remembered Evie now, her voice, the way she laughed when she jumped into piles of snow, her stuffed bear worn down at the ears. He remembered sitting beside her in the dark, both of them listening as their father whispered, "Stay quiet." He remembered feeling responsible for not being strong enough, for letting her fall, but he also remembered running for help, remembered screaming her name. She had slipped away from him, not by choice, not because she was careless, because someone had come for them, and now he remembered enough to know that person had been real. The man in the black coat, the shadow in the window, the 5th presence in the cabin. The chopper blades thundered above the Colorado wilderness, slicing through the cold mountain air. Below, the forest stretched endlessly, snow-drenched pines, jagged ridges, and winding streams frozen in time. But tucked away in the heart of that silence, just beyond a narrow game trail, lay the ruins of the Hollis family cabin, buried beneath nearly a decade of snowfall, rot, and pine needles. It had taken weeks to get the permits, even longer to dig through the dense terrain and analyze satellite imagery of the area from the winter of 2013. But now, 11 years later, a joint team of federal agents, forensic anthropologists, and cadaver dogs were on site, unearthing the past one frozen inch at a time. At the edge of the site, Detective Henry Blake stood with his boots half sunk in the snow, staring at what remained of the cabin's foundation. The walls had collapsed long ago. Only the stone chimney still stood, like a gravestone above a forgotten life. "They had no chance," said Agent Vickers quietly, joining him. Maybe they did, Blake replied, nodding toward the crew unfolding ground-penetrating radar equipment nearby. Someone survived. She didn't say anything. They both knew survival didn't mean escape. Not really. The dogs found the first body near what had once been the back porch. The scent had weakened over time, masked by roots and river sediment, but it was still there, just deep enough to be missed by the original search teams. The forensic team worked silently, carefully removing soil layer by layer. Hours passed before a tarp was pulled taut and 2 skeletal remains were loaded into transport cases. The preliminary report came quickly, both adults, male and female, adult height and build. One with an old wrist fracture consistent with Jenna Hollis's medical history. The other, still wearing the rusted remnants of a wedding band on his left hand, was identified as Mark Hollis. Vickers watched from a distance as the medical examiner zipped the bags shut. "They died here," she said softly. "They never made it out of the woods." Blake's jaw tightened. He tried to protect them. He made the video. Then something went wrong. "Or someone forced them back into the cabin," Vickers added. They both turned toward what had once been the front door, a charred plank now lying on the snow like a fractured memory. The second body was harder to find. It was a small thing, buried beneath a layer of ice near the edge of a partially frozen creek, nearly 200 yards from the cabin. A drone operator caught a flash of silver glinting between the trees, sunlight bouncing off something embedded in the frost. They hiked to the site on foot, snow crunching beneath their boots. Vickers spotted it first, a child's bracelet half frozen in the creek bed. It was bent, delicate, etched with tiny snowflake charms. Evie's. For a long moment, no one moved. Then the forensic team began digging. They found bone fragments scattered beneath the surface, small, fragile, fractured by time and water. It wasn't a full skeleton, but it was enough. DNA samples were rushed to the lab. Within 48 hours, the results confirmed what everyone already knew. Evie Hollis had been found. When Liam was told, he didn't cry. He didn't speak for several minutes either. He sat with his back straight, hands in his lap, staring at the silver bracelet laid gently on a velvet cloth before him. "I remember the sound of the ice," he said finally. "It was thin. I told her to walk around, but she wanted to take the shortcut. She thought she could do it." He reached out and touched the bracelet lightly. It cracked under her. I grabbed her arm, but it was slippery, and I was scared. She slipped away. Elena, the trauma counselor, sat nearby. "You were trying to save her, Liam. That was brave." He shook his head. It wasn't enough. She didn't try to correct him. Some wounds were too deep for logic to reach. She simply sat with him in the silence. Then Liam said something unexpected. "He followed us." Elena looked up. "The man in the coat." Liam nodded slowly. "He was behind us in the woods. I think he watched the whole time. He didn't try to stop it. He just waited." "Waited for what?" "I don't know." His voice dropped. "Maybe for me to be alone." Back at the dig site, a pattern had begun to emerge. It wasn't just the bodies or the artifacts. It was what was missing that mattered most. No weapons, no bloodstains, no signs of animals. The house hadn't been burned, ransacked, or collapsed from natural disaster. It had simply been left, quietly, deliberately, as if whoever had taken the family wanted them to disappear without a trace. Blake stood inside the skeletal remains of the cabin, snow crunching beneath his feet, eyes scanning the ruins like a battlefield. A forensic tech pointed to a scuff on one of the stones in the hearth, a bullet groove, nearly invisible. "Just one?" Blake asked. "So far," the tech replied. "Small caliber, fired from inside." "Someone tried to fight back," Vickers said from behind him. Blake nodded. "Or scare him off." "Do we have Kerr's ballistics on file?" "No, but we're working on getting a warrant to reopen his property records. If he stored anything illegal back then, it'll be on file." Vickers exhaled. "So we have a motive, a suspect, and now 3 bodies." Blake glanced at the photo pinned to his clipboard, 4 smiling faces taken from the camera video. But one made it out. That night, snow fell heavy across the Colorado hills. Liam watched the coverage from the facility's common room. The news had broken that remains were recovered at the Hollis site. The media speculated, possible closure, potential suspects, anonymous sources linking a man named Kerr to the investigation. Liam didn't listen to the words. He just stared at the picture. His mother's face, his father's hand on her shoulder, Evie's lopsided grin, his own small smile, unaware of what was about to come. They were good people, he said quietly to no one. And then, he didn't just want revenge. He wanted them to vanish, like they never mattered. He stood, walked to the window, and pressed his forehead against the glass. But they were found. His family wasn't gone anymore. They were witnesses, even in death. And he wasn't a ghost anymore. He was the one who came back. The file on Raymond Kerr was over an inch thick, its edges yellowed from time and neglect. For years, he had been nothing more than a name in a forgotten grievance. An ex-employee with a grudge and a quick temper, quietly shuffled out of a Denver financial firm after internal audits revealed embezzlement. But now, with the recovery of the Hollis remains and Liam's testimony, Kerr's name burned like a flare across every boardroom in the Denver field office. Detective Blake stared at the grainy surveillance still, taken from a gas station 30 miles from the Hollis cabin 2 days before Christmas 2013. The timestamp read 12:03 a.m., and the man pumping gas wore a black parka with a fur-lined hood. The camera had caught him in profile, sharp nose, grizzled beard, and eyes hidden beneath the shadow of his cap. No name was attached to the purchase. He paid cash. But Blake didn't need a name. He'd seen the same posture, the same heavy stride in the reflection on the Hollis cabin window. Even blurred, the silhouette matched. He looked back down at the folder. Kerr had no next of kin, no surviving siblings, and no verified address after January 2014. His last known residence, a dilapidated rental on the outskirts of Fort Collins, had been vacated, the utilities shut off, and forwarding information left blank. There had been no sign of foul play, no signs of life either. Until now. Where does a man like Kerr go when he wants to disappear? Blake murmured. Off-grid, Agent Vickers answered, stepping into the room. She tossed a file onto the desk. We found land under his cousin's name, 40 acres outside of Silver Plume, deep in the woods, hunting cabin, no permits, no paper trail. Locals say someone's still up there. Reclusive, carries a shotgun, keeps to himself. Blake nodded. Let's go meet the neighbor from hell. The trail to the cabin was little more than a washboard road, swallowed by pine and frost. It took them nearly 3 hours to reach the property, navigating through switchbacks and tight turns slick with old snow. When they finally pulled into a clearing, the trees parted to reveal a sagging log structure covered in rust-colored moss. Smoke curled faintly from the chimney. Someone's home, Blake muttered. Vickers checked her weapon as she stepped out of the vehicle. Let's hope he answers the door like a gentleman. They approached carefully, boots crunching in the snow. A wind chime made of old keys clinked above the porch, eerie and metallic, like wind whispering through a jail cell. Blake knocked once, firm and loud, no response. He tried again, still silence. Then, just as Vickers reached for the door handle, it creaked open. A man stood there, half shielded by the shadows inside. He was older now, grey in the beard, deeper creases around his eyes, but the resemblance was unmistakable. Raymond Kerr. His eyes flicked from Vickers to Blake. Federal? He asked, voice dry. FBI, Blake confirmed. We'd like to ask you some questions. Kerr didn't blink. If this is about the cabin, I don't have anything to say. Blake's jaw tightened. You just did. The interrogation took place in Denver. Kerr was brought in without resistance. No weapons were found on him, just an old knife, a stack of handwritten journals, and a map marked with trails around Flatiron Ridge. He was eerily calm through the ride, even when told why he was being detained. I knew it would catch up eventually, he said quietly. 12 years is a long time to keep quiet. In the interview room, he sat across from Blake and Vickers, hands folded neatly in front of him. His parka had been taken. He looked smaller without it. Older, but not afraid. Blake placed a photo on the table. Liam's face, now 17. He's alive, Blake said. He remembers you. Kerr looked at the photo and nodded. He would. Where were you the night the Hollis family disappeared? Where you think I was? You went to the cabin. Kerr didn't answer right away. Then he leaned forward, eyes steady. I didn't go there to kill anyone. I just wanted to talk to Mark. He owed me something. What did he owe you? Vickers asked. Everything, Kerr said. My job, my name, my future. He humiliated me in front of everyone. Cost me everything I built. So you went to the cabin, Blake said. What happened? I knocked. Nobody answered. I saw them inside, happy, laughing, like none of it had ever touched them. It wasn't fair. So you forced your way in? Kerr's jaw tightened. I didn't break in. Mark came out the back with a bat. Thought I was a threat. I tried to explain. Then the lights went out. Someone screamed. It was chaos. He paused, his voice lowering. I didn't hurt them. I swear, they ran. Into the woods. I called after them, but it was snowing. I didn't have a flashlight. I didn't know where they went. Then why disappear? Blake asked. Because I knew what it looked like. Me, the disgruntled ex-partner. No alibi, no phone. I panicked. I left the state. Vickers stared at him. And you never came forward, never told anyone. You let them believe that family vanished without reason. They were already gone, Kerr said. By the time I came back the next morning, the place was empty. Just mugs on the counter. Tree still lit, like a ghost town. Did you see the camera? Kerr shook his head. No. What camera? Blake slid a still photo across the table, Mark Hollis's face captured in the video, right before the words, "If someone finds this, it means we didn't make it." Kerr blinked. Jesus, he whispered. He knew. That night, Blake sat in his office alone, reviewing the transcript of the interview. Kerr had failed a polygraph. He admitted to being at the cabin, admitted to threatening Mark, but maintained he never touched the kids, never chased them, never laid a hand on Evie. Yet Liam remembered otherwise. The coat, the presence in the woods. The man who watched them drown. Was it trauma rewriting truth, or guilt redrawing memory? One fact remained undeniable. Kerr had been there, and when the Hollis family ran for their lives into the snow, he did nothing. He let the cold claim them, let the silence bury them, but now the silence was broken. The snow was falling in thick, heavy sheets. It whispered across the forest floor like secrets buried beneath silence. Liam was running. He remembered the trees, how their limbs reached like claws, how the shadows moved too fast. His boots slipped over patches of ice as he dragged Evie behind him, her mittened hand tight in his. Behind them, the cabin door slammed open. The sound echoed through the woods like a gunshot. He didn't dare look back. I'm scared, Evie had whispered, her breath ragged. Where's Mommy? Keep running, Liam had said. That was what played in his dreams, over and over. But now, under the care of Elena and the FBI trauma team, those dreams had begun to shift. The shadows had shape now. The fear had clarity. And the memory, once scattered fragments, was starting to form a timeline. On the day it all came back, it was raining in Denver. Elena sat in the facility's therapy room, lights dimmed, her voice soft. Do you want to try again today? Liam nodded. She handed him the drawing pad. Sometimes it was easier for Liam to sketch than speak. He had already drawn the cabin interior in near-perfect detail, the fireplace, the pine garlands, the angle of the Christmas tree. But today he didn't draw the inside. He drew the woods. And a man. A figure in a parka, face hidden by shadow, standing between two trees, watching. This is the moment I saw him, Liam said, his pencil motionless now. Elena leaned forward. What was he doing? Nothing, Liam said. That's what scared me. He wasn't yelling, he wasn't chasing. He just stood there, like he was waiting for us to be alone. Elena looked at the figure. Was it Raymond Kerr? Liam shook his head. I don't know. I thought so. I did. But now I think it was someone else. Agent Vickers stood in Blake's office, holding a printed copy of the drawing. This changes things, she said. Blake leaned forward. Liam says it might not have been Kerr. He's uncertain. He says the man was taller, broader, different gait. Blake frowned. So either Kerr's lying about being alone out there, or there was another person in those woods. Vickers placed a file beside the drawing. Kerr's journals. There's something strange in here. She opened the file and flipped to a weather-stained page near the back. He followed me that night. I felt it, through the trees. I didn't know him. Didn't see his face. But he was there. When I left the cabin, I heard his footsteps, separate from the family's. He wasn't after them. He was after me. Blake looked up sharply. You think there was a third party? It's possible. Kerr claims he never got close enough to harm the family. He says someone else was watching him. And Liam remembers 2 sets of footsteps. They stared at the drawing again, a shape in the woods, separate, still, watching both predator and prey. That night, Liam's dreams changed. For years, they had been static, looping fragments of terror, cold, and helplessness. But now the dreams bled into something new. A voice, a breath, and eyes. In the dream, he saw the man more clearly. The coat was different from Kerr's, longer, coarser. And the man didn't move like Kerr. He was quieter, patient. Liam remembered being told to stay quiet, even when the man called his name from the trees. He hadn't remembered that part before. He woke in a cold sweat, heart pounding, the name echoing in his ears. Liam. But it wasn't his father's voice. The next day, Blake and Vickers met with Liam under observation. They showed him 2 photos, one of Kerr and another, a grainy image from a trail cam found on a hunter's blog from late 2013, taken near the Flatiron Ridge. The second man was older, bearded, thin, wearing a long oilskin coat. The photo had been dismissed at the time as coincidence. Now Liam's eyes widened. That's him, he whispered, the man in the woods. Blake and Vickers exchanged a look. The trail cam photo had been taken less than 3 miles from the Hollis cabin. His name is Martin Reese, Vickers said gently. Local loner, military background, went missing in 2015, suspected of involvement in a separate disappearance, but no charges filed. I don't know his name, Liam said, but I remember his eyes. He looked at Blake. He wasn't angry like Kerr. He was calm, like this was all planned. Later that evening, Blake reviewed everything again. Liam's testimony, the journals, the drawing, the map of the woods. One thing stood out. If Kerr hadn't been alone, if he had been manipulated into coming to that cabin, led by resentment and rage, could he have been bait? Could Reese have orchestrated the entire event? The whispers of a darker truth began forming, that the Hollis family was never meant to vanish by accident. They were meant to disappear quietly, without a trace, and Liam's survival had ruined that plan. Back in the facility, Liam stood by the window again, the drawing still in his hand. He watched the city lights flicker beyond the glass and said softly to no one, he didn't want us to die in fear. He wanted us to be forgotten. The old cabin was still hiding secrets. It wasn't just the snow-covered foundation or the faded photographs in the attic. It wasn't even the 2 bodies buried beneath layers of time. Something else was buried deeper, beneath the very floorboards, and Detective Blake was about to uncover it. They'd known for days that the cabin held more than what had been found. The presence of the second set of footprints in the snow, the witness testimony from Liam, and the unsettling nature of the family's disappearance all pointed to something dark that had been intentionally hidden. Something had happened that night, and it wasn't just about a killer on the loose. Blake walked into the cabin alone, an eerie silence hanging over the site now that the media had moved on. The trees were still bare from winter's grip, and the wind moaned like a long-lost soul. As the sun began to set behind the mountain range, casting long shadows across the rubble, Blake's eyes darted over every corner. His mind replayed the statements, the interviews, the drawings, the evidence. Every piece pointed to one thing. This was no ordinary crime. He kneeled beside what remained of the hearth. The rubble here was less disturbed than other parts of the cabin. The dust thickened, untouched for years. Blake ran his fingers over the debris, wooden beams, scattered bricks, and broken furniture pieces. Then his fingers found something odd, a thin metal sheet wedged between 2 large stones. His heart skipped. He carefully pried it free. The sheet was old, coated with rust, but when he twisted it, He could feel the give of something beneath it. A trapdoor. A slow breath escaped his lips. He had found it. Hours later, Blake stood in the cold night air, watching as forensic teams cleared the cabin of all remaining debris. He wasn't the only one who was interested in the discovery. Agent Vickers joined him at the site, her brow furrowed as she surveyed the area. The moment Blake had found the trapdoor, she had contacted the team to come and retrieve the item. They weren't sure what they would find, but they needed to know. "What's under there?" she asked, her voice tense with anticipation. Blake looked down, taking in the sight of the black hole leading into the earth. Whatever it is, it's something the killer didn't want anyone to find. And it's something that could change everything we thought we knew about this case. Vickers studied him, but he said nothing more, instead turning his attention back to the trapdoor as the crew set to work. The door, once lifted, revealed a narrow, dank tunnel. A musty, foul smell seeped from the hole, and Blake could hear the sound of scurrying beneath the floorboards. "Get the lights," Blake said. They quickly brought in portable floodlights, casting sharp beams of light down into the opening. A team member lowered himself into the hole, the tunnel stretching into a narrow crawl space, deep beneath the cabin. Blake could feel the weight of the moment. The air around them had thickened, as if the cabin itself were holding its breath. Vickers exchanged a glance with him, her expression darkening. The team member reached the bottom of the tunnel and paused. Then, with a small shout, he pulled something into the light. A bundle, wrapped tightly in cloth. "Got something?" the agent called out. Blake moved toward the hole, kneeling down as the bundle was carefully pulled up into the light. The cloth, stained with dirt, was unfolded, and as the light hit it, Blake froze. It was a child's jacket, a faded pink fabric, familiar in its design. There was a tag inside, worn with age but still legible. Evie Hollis's jacket. Blake felt the air leave his lungs in one violent exhale. His heart slammed in his chest. The jacket wasn't just another forgotten item, it had been hidden, stashed away beneath the floorboards in the exact spot where no one would think to look. Evie. His thoughts swirled with the implications. What did this mean? Why had it been hidden? Was it meant to be a clue? Or was it something far more sinister, an item meant to remind everyone of her fate? Vickers crouched next to Blake, her face ashen as she touched the jacket. Why hide this here? Why not burn it, or discard it somewhere else? Blake stared at the jacket, his mind racing. This isn't just about hiding evidence, this is about controlling the story. Vickers frowned, processing his words. Controlling the narrative. Exactly. Whoever did this wanted to ensure that people would forget about Evie, Blake said softly, his fingers brushing against the cloth. They wanted her to vanish completely. And now they're trying to erase her from the timeline of events. Blake stood, his mind settling on a harsh truth. Whoever had taken the family, whoever had orchestrated the disappearance of the Hollis family on that night in December, wasn't just after a quick kill. This was a calculated effort to bury their memories. But Blake wasn't done yet. He knew there had to be more. The question now was, how far did the rabbit hole go? Hours later, in the sterile light of the FBI's forensic lab, the jacket was thoroughly examined. Testing revealed traces of soil from the area around the cabin's foundations. That meant the jacket had been buried while the ground was still soft, likely within days of the family's disappearance. Blake sat with Vickers, waiting for the rest of the team to finish processing the rest of the evidence from the site. The walls of the lab felt suffocating now, as if the truth was pressing in from every direction. "We're missing something," Vickers muttered, her eyes flicking between the files on the table. "Something in the timeline." Blake leaned back in his chair. The jacket was hidden beneath the floorboards, but it was meant to be found. Whoever did this wanted us to know Evie was there. But why? "You think it was left as a clue?" "I think it was left as a reminder," Blake said quietly, "a sick form of punishment. Whoever took them didn't want them to be forgotten, but they didn't want them to be found either. It's a contradiction, like they were playing a game." Vickers looked up, her eyes hardening. "Then we're dealing with someone who's not just a killer. We're dealing with someone who's meticulous, deliberate." Blake didn't reply. He only stared at the jacket, feeling the weight of the cold, calculating presence that had haunted the Hollis family that night. A voice in his head whispered a chilling thought. The killer wanted to be caught. Back at the facility, Liam had been given the space to recover, but his mind was never still. He lay awake most nights, staring at the ceiling, his thoughts racing with fragments of the past. Flashes of faces, the echo of running footsteps, the cold feeling of ice beneath him, and always the shadow in the woods. The more Blake thought about it, the more certain he became. They weren't dealing with just a man trying to escape the consequences of his actions. They were dealing with someone who wanted to be remembered. Certainly, here's the final chapter of the story. The road to the end wasn't straight. It twisted through years of silence, dark woods, and broken memories. But as dawn rose over Denver, casting pale light across the FBI briefing room, Detective Blake knew the path had finally run out. The team had assembled early. Files were stacked on the table, maps dotted with red pins, and stills from the cabin, the woods, and the riverbank lined the corkboard. At the center was a picture of the Hollis family, smiling, unaware of the trap closing around them one Christmas Eve. Liam Hollis sat quietly at the back of the room, his hands folded in his lap. He wasn't here as a child anymore. He was a witness now, a survivor, and maybe, finally, the key. Blake stood before them, clearing his throat. "We know Raymond Kerr was at the cabin that night," he began. "He admits it. But everything we've learned says he wasn't alone." He turned to the photo Liam had helped identify. Martin Reese, former military intelligence officer, survivalist, and missing person since 2015. "We believe Reese orchestrated the disappearance, not out of revenge, but ideology." He pointed to the map. Reese was obsessed with the idea of disappearing without a trace. In his journals, he talked about total erasure, the belief that true freedom comes when your footprint is wiped from the world. He didn't just want to vanish himself, he wanted to prove he could make others vanish too. Vickers stepped in, flipping a page. In 2011, Reese contacted Raymond Kerr through a fringe survivalist forum. Kerr, angry and unstable after losing his job, was looking for someone to blame. Reese gave him that, fed his paranoia, validated his delusions. Then, in December 2013, he told Kerr where Mark Hollis was spending Christmas. Blake added, Reese followed Kerr into the mountains. He let Kerr confront Mark, let chaos erupt. Then, while the family fled into the woods, Reese followed them. He let the silence hang for a moment. He didn't act out of rage. He waited, he watched. He used the snow, the darkness, the fear, and when the time was right, he took what he wanted and buried the rest. Later that day, they found Reese, or what was left of him. The tip came from a hunter who'd been reading the local news about the Hollis case. Said he found a remote shack 2 winters ago while tracking elk. Inside, there was a cot, a rusted stove, and a wall covered in newspaper clippings, all about missing families, including the Hollises. The FBI followed the coordinates. Deep in the Colorado backcountry, tucked into a canyon only accessible by foot, they found the shack. It was empty, but beneath the floorboards, another signature move, they found bones. A forensic team confirmed the identity within 48 hours. Martin Reese had been dead for nearly 8 years. A single bullet to the head, no signs of struggle. A suicide note carved into the wall with a knife. To vanish is to win. If they remember you, you failed. Vickers stared at it for a long time. So why leave the jacket, she asked. Blake looked around the cabin. Because deep down, he wanted someone to remember. Even monsters crave legacy. For Liam, the discovery was both a relief and a new wound. He stood outside the facility that evening, the sun dipping low, turning the clouds to fire. Eleanor joined him. They found him, she said gently, the man in the woods. He's gone. Liam nodded. I always wondered if he was still watching me. He's not. Liam glanced at the horizon. I thought I wanted to forget, but now I think remembering is how I survive. Elena smiled softly. You didn't just survive, Liam. You brought them home. In the weeks that followed, the remains of Mark, Jenna, and Evie Hollis were buried in a private family plot outside Boulder. The funeral was small, quiet. But for the first time in 11 years, there was a place to go, a place to say goodbye. Liam stood before the 3 headstones, wind tugging at his sleeves. He placed Evie's old penguin toy, rescued from the recovered evidence box, on her grave. Its stitching was frayed, its eyes scratched, but it still smiled. "I remember you," he whispered. "Every day." Back at the Denver field office, Blake closed the Hollis file. Officially, case closed. But there was no victory in it. No triumph, just the solemn weight of truth finally unearthed. Vickers entered quietly and handed him a box. "What's this?" he asked. "Evidence that was missed back in 2014. It was in the coat lining." Blake opened the box. Inside was a small cassette tape, one of those miniature ones used in old handheld voice recorders. It was labeled in faint ink, 12-24-13. His breath caught. He inserted it into a player and hit play. A low hiss. Then a man's voice, shaky, scared. "If someone finds this, it means we didn't make it." Mark Hollis. "There's a man outside. He's watching us. I don't know why he's here, but I think he means to make us disappear. If this is found, please, don't let them forget my kids. Don't let them vanish." Silence. Then faintly, a girl's laugh. Evie. Then static. Then darkness. A month later, Liam Hollis appeared on a quiet podcast hosted by a local journalist. It wasn't a big show, just a woman with a mic and a mission to tell true stories the world had forgotten. She asked him why he wanted to speak now. He answered, "Because we weren't a mystery. We were a family."